Kast. I'm your host, the Mortal Kombat FANTiM, and with me as always is our co-host, the lore master Yanni. Welcome, Yanni.
Thanks, FANTiM, and welcome to Daniel Pesina, or Master Pesina, also known in the Mortal Kombat community as not just the original Johnny Cage, but also Sub-Zero, Scorpion, Reptile, Smoke, and even Noob Saibot. Welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
It's great to have you on today. Yeah, so Master Pesina, normally we like to start off by asking how Mortal Kombat has kind of affected you throughout the years. For you, I mean, it's completely different because you've been there from the very beginning. So rather than jumping straight into Mortal Kombat, let's kind of talk about your history before Mortal Kombat. We just kind of want to kind of set the stage of how this all started. So before Mortal Kombat, you were already really well versed in various martial art techniques. Is it true that you kind of started martial arts back in 1970?
I started martial arts in 1969.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
So yeah, so a while ago, that my journey with the martial art started way back then. But I started with judo, a little bit of Shotokan karate, and a little bit of Shotokan jiu-jitsu for samurai.
How did you get started with martial arts in the beginning?
Well, I have two older brothers who are 8 and 10 years older than I am. So we goof around. Me and my brother Carlos, who is Raiden, too. I am 8 years older than him. So it's kind of weird. My older brothers goof around and say, "You guys are the honeymoon guys." You know, all of a sudden, mom and dad decided to have a honeymoon. You know, but when I was a kid, about 6 years old, my father and I used to watch a movie with Charlie Chan, the detective. It was a black and white episode, 1 hour episode where this Chinese detective would solve a mystery in different parts of the world. And during one of the episodes, I recall like him throwing a guy. There was this big guy messing with him, and he's a short, round guy. But he threw him. He did a judo move and threw him. And then I just felt so fascinated with how he was so small and able to throw that guy that basically I bugged my father for lessons. In the end, I have to say my motivation was, I'm going to be able to throw my bigger brothers. Because they would win at everything. They would beat my butt at everything. We'd race, they'd win. We'd do this, they'd win. Because naturally, they're older. They're already a little, mature. So I was like, man, I'm going to get these guys with this.
Did it work?
I don't know. I never got to throw them. I got to fake throw my father. Looking back at it, he was like, I could teach you that, because my dad served in the U.S. military during the Korean War. But he showed me how to, and then he flipped over, and then I wanted to do it again, but because I was like, wow, it really works, but my dad wouldn't let me. And, just looking back at that, I probably hurt him, because he probably really didn't, wasn't proficient at the martial arts, being in the military for that long. They're more used to firing arms. So looking back, he let me probably throw his back
out. So you moved from those martial arts into the Kung Fu as well, with both Shaolin and Wushu, I think?
Yeah. Actually, the judo school, the judo karate center that I was attending, which was about a couple miles from my house, used to take the bus. Back then I was like, I remember my dad driving me to judo lessons. And then eventually he was like, you got to learn how to take the bus. So at 11 years old, I was taking the bus to judo lessons 3 or 4 times a week. So that place was relatively close to my home, my parents' home. It was one straight shot down Archer Avenue, if you know Chicago. But that school closed. And so my dad was like, man, this is really good for him. It keeps him out of trouble, kind of, gives him discipline, something to work it, exercise, good for him. So my dad found a Kung Fu school in Chinatown. And I got to, and I'm about 12 minutes from Chinatown, on the opposite direction of where the judo school was. So I could take a bus there. But the instructor was Wei Lun Choi. He's like Grand Master of Luho Ba Fa. Later on, Dan Inosanto, Bruce Lee's student, would fly into Chicago to study with this guy, kung fu with this guy, because he was really, really good.
That's
Wow.
amazing. Like, and so how long did you end up studying kung fu?
Uh, till present day. Uh, so yeah,
They're just gonna say yes.
yeah. I stayed with him for 2 years, and then he moved up north, which I was not capable of following up there. But I kept practicing by myself until I found basically a guy doing 7-star praying mantis, which is Shaolin style, Shaolin 7-star praying mantis. It's northern style. Uh, so I studied there for like 5 or 6 years until I got the contemporary wushu bug, where it's more physical and acrobatical.
Hmm.
Not going to say it's back then. It's well rooted in traditional martial arts, traditional wushu. Meaning, a lot of people think wushu is different than kung fu. No, kung fu is like skill in time or skill in work, while wushu means war. Shu is art. So wu is war. Shu is art. So it's war art. So, but you can have wushu and not have kung fu, because kung fu is the hard work. That's what makes you good. So, if you do taekwondo, you can have kung fu. If you do car repair and have a high level of that, you can do kung fu. Or computer work, you could do kung fu. Photography, you can also have kung fu. So the distinction that we make training in China is there's traditional wushu and contemporary wushu. So I really like the contemporary wushu because it's all that flying stuff, acrobatic stuff. It's all these stuff that looks really, really cool, but is relatively difficult to achieve, just because you have to be stronger, you have to be more flexible. Everything is just physically more than people would think. So started learning that, and just continued my journey. Really competed with that stuff, and eventually went back to traditional kung fu as I got older, or wushu. Yeah.
Did you have a particular technique that, I mean, or even today, is there a particular technique that you enjoy more out of the kung fu and the wushu that you've been working with?
I like I like uh, it's two things. For external, I like the Northwestern systems, and the Northwestern systems are not so known outside of China. Like when you see, they're rarely shown in cinema too. So I like that because it's still something new and trend setting, and when you see stuff, you usually see northern or southern style in movie. But these Northwestern styles, uh, which are the older styles in China, have a different kind of flavor to them. They're like really, really fast paced, and they require a lot of uh, physical conditioning, not like just weightlifting. Like you hit stuff. Like they're known to like, oh, I have a 50-pound metal bag that I kick and punch. So that's one of the requirements, is to get your hands in such a condition for this stuff that it's really what makes it really super dangerous. But it does take a long time. So I like the Northwestern stuff, FANTiM, Dongbei, Piqua. For people listening, they could look those up. And then for internal, I like Yin Fu Bagua. And Bagua was featured in The Last Airbender
Mhm.
as kind of the style that the Airbender does.
Okay, yeah, yeah. So
Is it?
more the like acrobatical flying type things.
Yeah, a lot of body dodging. That is like, oh, they rarely block. They do a lot of dodging, because when you're blocking, you can't strike. But when you're dodging, you can strike. So it's,
And that's exactly what the whole airbender style was supposed to be, right? Dodging rather than blocking and everything.
yeah.
You managed, like, it's quite the departure from what we're talking about, but it kind of leads on. You eventually got a role as a foot soldier in the 1991 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie, Secret of the Ooze. How did you land that role?
We were at a tournament called Battle of Atlanta, one of the biggest tournaments in North America. And we heard that there were people looking for stuntmen, because back in those days, regular an actor couldn't really do their own stunts. It was just too dangerous. Now with CG and wire work and stuff like that, a lot more mainstream actors or famous actors can do their own stunt work, because there's a lot more safety than there was back then. So there was a group looking for martial artists. We didn't know what movie, but myself and Hosang and Rich Divisio Kano, we made an agreement. Hey, we were like, if they approach us about doing a movie, we'll mention the other two. The other two people, they're really cool too. You should watch them and do that. So eventually they approached Hosang, and Hosang was like, oh, thanks for choosing me. You got to check out these two guys. So eventually through that tournament, we got to go down to North Carolina for 4 months and do stunt works on turtles.
That's so cool.
Wow.
And then Hosung, he ended up playing one of the turtles, didn't he?
Yeah, he's Raphael.
That's awesome.
It was cool. It was
What about
good
what about
experience.
Richard? Who did he end up playing?
He did some stunts for the foot soldiers.
Oh, awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, there's definitely a height limitation too with everything with stunts. Because if you're 5'8", you're going to be like a 6 foot turtle, which is not the look they're looking for.
Yeah. So, I guess let's go ahead and start jumping into. I mean, from there, you got involved with Mortal Kombat. So, before we kind of really deep dive into this, who is your favorite Mortal Kombat character?
My favorite Mortal Kombat character. I'm going to adjust my chair a little bit. Thank you. Actually, it is the character that is now known as Johnny Cage. Before, when we were filming, he didn't really have a name. He was just Danny. It was just me, my name.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
So and I like him because he's the father of all characters. A lot of people. An example is you see videos of the creation of Mortal Kombat 1. Those aren't even like the first 60 hours of video. We erased all that stuff to save money. John and I spent about 60, 70 hours filming martial arts stuff to try to figure out what would work for this game, because there wasn't a game like this. There was Pit Fighter, but those guys didn't really know how to fight, and the action was a little choppy. And John wanted this to look more like our original idea when we pitched it to Midway and Ed was we wanted it to look like Dragon Slayer.
Mm-hmm.
Like a really smooth video, like a kung fu movie, but a smoothness to it. But that technology didn't want to spend on this game.
Yeah.
Well, we've got a lot of old school listeners on this show, as well as people who've actually just recently discovered Mortal Kombat. So you're kind of talking about the beginning. Why don't you tell us how it actually all began with Mortal Kombat in '92?
So my brother is an artist. He likes to draw and sketch, sculpt, and so is John Tobias. And sometimes they would be at my parents' kitchen table or at a friend's kitchen table drawing. And I really enjoyed watching both of them work because it's a skill that I don't have. So any skill that I do not have, it fascinates me because I know, to be good at martial arts, you spend a lot of time and sacrifice a lot of things for that. Mm-hmm. And so when I see another skill, I'm like, man, it's really cool because they're doing the exact same thing that I'm doing, but just in a different set. So I would watch them draw and stuff like that and kind of be like, wow, you guys are, really going to be something. But when John was in art school, he had to do a movie project because, you're in art school, you get diverse stuff, not only drawing, you're going to do, and sculpting, you're going to do other forms. So he called me up and he's just like, hey, I want to shoot a kung fu movie, and I was like, cool, let's do that. He's like, I got all this equipment from my school. Maybe you, me, and you, myself, which is Tobias, Rich and Carlos can go out to the forest preserve and just kind of shoot a kung fu movie guerrilla style. No skit, no choreography beforehand. We'll just make it up when we get there. That way I could have it all in the can and get it edited. And this will be from for a school grade. So I was like, okay, cool. So we picked us up in his dad's car and we went out to the forest preserve to shoot this movie. But when we didn't have a location, so we're kind of just looking around. We saw a location. We started making a left into it on a two-lane roadway. It wasn't a street because the speed limit was like 45, so it's not so it's not like 30 in the city. It's, you could go a little faster. So anyway, sorry for a long story, but we're making a left and this guy tries to pass us on the left. So he hits John Tobias's dad's car and we spin around a few times and land in a ditch. And literally, if it was 6 inches closer to the front end, he would have killed Rich. Kano would have been dead because the car was totaled. Car was totaled. We never finished that project, but I got to be friends with John because we had to wait like 4 hours for a tow truck. And we were just sitting on the road waiting for a tow truck. And we just talked about like life and, too, that experience. We were like, holy cow, we could almost die. And that thing really brings people together.
Yeah.
Quicker than just hanging out and having a drink, because you're like, holy cow, that could have been it, because you can see what it is. But anyway, I would say a few years later, shortly after Turtles, John calls me up and he's just like, hey, remember that movie thing we wanted to do? And I started laughing. I was like, yeah, man, Rich almost died. How can you not remember that? And so he's like, well, I work for this Midway Games, and I got an idea. I want to do a real martial art fighting game with real martial artists. He says, it's never been done. He goes, will you help me do this project? And I was like, cool. And I'm like, well, what are you going to pay? Because he was working for a company. He's like, well, I can't pay you too much. He goes, but, any ideas you have, we're going to throw in the game. And naturally, because I need all this help with all the martial arts side, you'll have credit for choreography and doing anything you do. Footage and stuff like that will all go to you to use for your reel, so you can take credit for this project because it's going to be a small project, 200 arcade cabinets. I have some drawings. Come in. I want you to choreograph some fight scenes, and we're going to take the drawings and that visualization of what I want in a game, and we're going to make a presentation to Midway. And I was like, cool. So, we went into Midway. We played a lot of games for a couple hours because it was free. We didn't have to put quarters in. So I was like, I'm playing free games. John showed us some sketches. And then I choreographed some fighting sets and movements. And then he took that and presented it to Midway. And about 3 days later, he called me up and says, hey, they're interested in making a fighting game. They want to, they want to hear more. He goes, so bring your best ideas and just be ready to answer questions on how you think this video game can, be created. He goes, because nobody's done this before. So I was like, okay. And so we arranged to have, I think it was lunchtime with their representative, which was Ed Boon. So Ed sat across the table from myself, Carlos, and Rich. We brought them along, and John and Ed sat on the other side of the table, and we kind of presented like a deeper pitch of things we wanted in the game. Like, we were geeks, so we already loved anime, loved comic books and things like that. So we were saying, oh, it's cool. We got to put in, X-rays or like in Fist of the North Star or in Dragon Ball, So we were just having all these ideas going out there because John was just like, before we met, John was like, we got to give them the best ideas. Otherwise, they will say no. He goes, and I really want to do this project, even though it's 200. He goes, I think this would be a really cool project to do. And I'm like, yeah, because I'm going to be doing a video game. Holy cow, I can't, believe it. So, during the pitch, it was when I told John, originally he wanted like the Japanese ninja clan. And I was like, John, we need to change it to the Lin Kuei. And he's like, what? And I was like, there's Chinese ninjas. And they're called the Lin Kuei, and they don't look like Japanese ninjas. They have this type of armor on and stuff like that. And I had a book called, I think it was Art of the Vagabond or something like that. I showed him the book, the Lin Kuei, and I introduced him to the Lin Kuei and said, you know what, this will be really unique. It won't be like a regular, since this video game, nothing like this has ever happened. This introducing these characters into it will also be like never seen before. It'll make this game so unique. And so John was like, okay, cool. He wanted to borrow my book. And in the end, I said no, but I took him to the store. We went to the store together to buy the book, in which we bought like which for just for reference and stuff like that. But then, I looked across and I asked, I was like, what do you think? I asked Ed, what do you think? And Ed just kind of tightened his lip and kind of just looked away from me. And I was like, oh no, they're not going to do this game. And then 2 days later, John calls me up and said, hey, they like the idea of a fighting game, but they're not going to do our game. They're going to go to a mainstream game because it'll make more quarters. And I was like, oh yeah, in the end, is it about the quarters? Because it's an arcade. It's got to make quarters.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So they were like, they're going to get Jean-Claude Van Damme to do a mainstream fighting game. And then I was like, okay. And then I was like, okay, but make sure that you guys do not use my Lin Kuei idea for Van Damme. Because if we ever get to do this game we're thinking of, I want to use it for that. He's like, okay. He goes, yeah, it's your idea. We're going to do that. So months later, I get a phone call from him again. He's like, hey, will you still help me create my game? And I was just like, yeah, what happened? He goes, well, he started laughing. He's like, Van Damme wants money. And these guys, they want to give him a percentage. And I was like, nah, dude, he's not going to like that, because you can manipulate. Even I knew, like, you couldn't manipulate money and be like, this game made no money, but it made, it made a lot of money. So I was like, okay, yeah. So he was just like, so I was like, okay, well, what do we do? And he's like, well, we got to create a pathway to the game. So just show up tomorrow and be ready to just film, and let's film all this martial arts stuff, anything you could think of, and we'll take a look at it and see if we can create a pathway into this game. So John and I spent, like I said, about 5 or 6, 8 to 12-hour days just filming moves and looking at it, and getting kind of ideas of what we can do with before. After that, after about the 5 or 6 those days, we invited Ed to take a look at what we came up with, see how to program it. So it was kind of cool. You had John, who really thought of the idea, and he let me do the martial art part, and now we were ready to ask the programmer of how we can create this game.
Was it all that footage at first? Was it just of you? That's what you were talking about earlier. Just basically Johnny Cage or Daniel Pesina footage.
Yes, me dressed as just in sweatpants and a t-shirt, no costume.
Uh-huh.
I laugh because the first day, Mortal Kombat, when I see it, even in the movies, when I see people acting like us in the movies, I smile a lot because I remember the stories about how things were created. So when I see, Scorpion doing the rope dart, or taking his head off and putting somebody on fire, or Sonya's kiss to death, or Raiden flying at you, there's all stories how those things were created, which are hilarious. So even when the actors are acting like us, I just smile because I'm like, oh my God, that was so hilarious. Even today in the new movie, when I watch it, it makes me smile because I'm like, oh my God, that was so funny to create that. The people just don't know that type of thing. But so when we set up and two, it was Tobias's dad's high-aid camera. It wasn't even a studio camera.
Uh-huh.
So when we set it up, I remember the first day, John set up the camera after we cleared out of space and a flat wall to film against. And he looked at me and says, do something cool. And that's how it started. Started doing movements, and he was like, wait a minute. And then he had high, medium, low. And that's what his guideline was. High, medium, low. And so we were just goofing around, trying to do, taking a look at different kicks of how they'd look, and try to figure out how to create this game.
When you guys so after everything was approved and you started making things, was there much character background, or was that all kind of developed right on set?
Most of it was done on set. Like for the Johnny Cage, and again, this is my perspective, and I understand that the company has their perspective. But when we were going to do Johnny Cage, he is modeled off of Daniel Rad from Iron Fist Kung Fu.
Hmm.
So that's when I was filming it, that's who I thought. A month later, as a gag, we put in some move from Van Damme, just because he said no to the project, and
Oh, yeah.
we wanted to make a gag. So, but that was already like a month after we've already been working on the game properly. So a lot of people are like, "Oh, it's based on Van Damme." No, not really. You know, when I was filming, there was no mention of Van Damme for about a month until we decided to make this joke. So, and two, it was like we were just allowed to do whatever we want, because
Mhm.
we didn't know what we were doing. We collaborated. You know, I was like, for Johnny Cage, John's like, walk out and hit a fighting stance. So I started walking out. I'm like, well, I'm a Hollywood guy, so I'm just waving to the crowd, and then I get in a fight. And by then we already knew what kind of fighting stance we needed, because we were like, you can't be too low, because if you stand up and then throw a kick, that's an extra frame to the movement that, memory will take up. And we got to save as much memory as we can, because we wanted to make it smooth as we can. So even what we see today is not even close to what we wanted it to be. It just changed later on when Ed was just like, hey, we can't do it like that. There's no way. We don't have enough time. We're only doing 200 cabinets, for us to really do this stuff. He was just like, you can't do stuff like that. But so we already have, kind of like that. Our first day of filming, we only had overhead lights, moving back and forth. Did that for 2 days, as the Danny character, which later on turned out to be Johnny Cage, doing that. And then when we looked at the film again, John was just like, we can't use this. And I was like, why not? He goes, look at you. He goes, when you're close to the camera, you're bigger. When you're further away, you're small. And I was like, oh, yeah. And he's like, I got to mark where we shoot from. And I was like, you know what? I got to start marking the floor for different references to know what I'm doing. So basically, John marked the tripod for the camera. And then I started, if you look at the making, you'll see a little square. And that's basically me just growing each time, saying, oh, the feet are here. How far can I go forward with the lighting? How far can I go back before the lighting changes? How far can I jump up before my head, the lighting changes? So light changing had a lot to do with a lot of making the frames clear, had a lot to do with how we videotape stuff. Sometimes it would take hours, because literally you would throw a punch like this, and then, I do it like 30 times. And then I'd look at it, and then I'd change it like this, just a little bit, just to kind of see the way the light hits. You know what I mean? If you go like, you see it, you know what I mean? See these two knuckles up here, you see more. But if you go like this, you see all four knuckles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just experimenting with different hand positions, different strikes, different foot technique. So a front kick, we filmed it like at the beginning, we filmed it like 9 different ways to see what would how it would turn up. So it was like a lot more than people think, like, oh, you just threw a kick. No, it wasn't like just throw a kick. We had to shape everything and overcome a lot of different obstacles.
Also, Mortal Kombat's really famous for each of the characters having their own style, like their own techniques to it. Can you tell us a little bit about how that ended up in the game?
Yeah, because too, when when John was like, hey, who else can we get to do the game? Cheap. I can't pay them. And I was like, oh, we could get Hosung, we could get Tony Marquez to be in the first game. He was going to be the Lin Kuei, but he broke his toe, so he wasn't the Lin Kuei. And then naturally we got Carlos. And then I recall early on, John wanted a female character, unsure of what it would be, but he wanted like, oh, we got to get a female character, and maybe we could get an African American character in the first game. As I recall, but the whole thing was, it was just kind of when we're doing stuff, we wanted to look better than the next guy.
Yeah.
So it was all about one-upping each other. Because too, didn't just film, the Johnny Cage character and he was done. We filmed the basic thing and we had to get to the next character, which was Kano, and then Kano would come up with something and then really be like, oh, because originally when we were doing stuff, we're like, oh, we want everybody to have 3 fatalities. So, we kind of had in mind we're going to do it. But then when Rich came up, we're like, oh, we have to have special moves because he's got the knives. Rich is going to fight with knives. And so we actually we filmed some stuff of him trying to use weapons in the first game, which didn't work out. But then he came up with like, oh, I have a special move. And then so eventually it was like, oh, you have to come back in the costume and film a special move because it would grow. So that happened, with Rich. And then we filmed Carlos. And 2, he would come up with something and then we'd be like, oh, we forgot to we don't have a reaction for that special move. So we got to film something for that. But each time we were always trying to outdo each other to look better than one another. And 2, I was like, oh, I already used that technique. You can't use that technique because then we're going to all look the same. You know what I mean? Yeah. Everybody has a unique personality that the actors are creating and movement that they are creating, but they have to have special things for themselves. So we were making sure that everyone did everything slightly different. Even the Lin Kuei, if you really look at it, because originally they were brothers, so they kind of have the same fighting style, but the kicks and everything are just a little bit different.
That's funny. It reminds me of when they were recording Predator, the movie. Like Arnold Schwarzenegger was on set and he would make fun of everybody else for, being too weak and things like that. So everybody was actually working out in secret in order to kind of put on more weight and ended up being bigger. And they would like run into each other in the gym as one would be leaving, like, oh yeah, I'm just walking through, but actually they're all secretly trying to outdo each other.
Yeah, egos.
Yeah, oh yeah, definitely.
I didn't even know about that, actually. So you mentioned about how you were all trying to maintain your own separate styles for each of those characters. How did that sort of, what was that sort of process behind the ideology behind each character? How did that personality sort of evolve through you as actors?
Well, from the, for instance, the Johnny Cage, after the wave, John was like, oh, that looks cool. Do it again. And this time I was like, you know what? I'm going to be really pompous about this. I'm going to wave, blow some kisses, and flex. So we did that a few times, and John is just laughing his ass off, and we're just laughing at it. And then finally, I was like, wait a minute, I need some sunglasses because I'm going to freaking put on the sunglasses, do all that. Do it. So then it was from that part that I did that, I was like, from now on, Johnny Cage has to be over the top charismatic. All the movements he's going to do are at the end are going to be like the style he's going to do is more like a charismatic style, So too, Kano was a mercenary. So when he was like, he kind of walk out kind of gruff, like more like a brawler than a technician. So he started to being like, that's where the whole reason why in the end Kano snatches your heart, because it's just that brawler grizzly type of
visceral sort of.
Yeah. Instead of doing like being a technician, like having kung fu, you are a technician. You're not a brawler. But he converted into that whole personality where he's just gruff, kind of not, kind of nasty guy type of thing.
Yeah.
So there was no real casting process. It seemed like you guys just kind of fell into your characters is what it sounds like.
Yeah, we just kind of, because there was John didn't have anything written down as far as like, oh, this guy's going to do this or that. No, we were just creating it on the spot, making jokes on the spot, going over, everything was over the top on the spot.
Okay. That's actually such an awesome process to even think about, just like how it sort of evolved just through you guys, just, I guess, having fun, really.
Yeah. Because again, when we finally started the game, I was like, John, make 201 arcade cabinets and give me an arcade cabinet, and I give you permission to do as many cabinets as you want.
Wow.
And John is like, no. And I was like, well, I know Ed's the boss, so ask Ed. So we went up to Ed, and he's like, Danny wants a cabinet. And Ed's like, no way. They're like $5,000. We're not going to give you a cabinet. And I was like, yeah, but if you make 201, you can make as many cabinets as you want because this game is going to be really good. And again, probably because of my ego, but just because I thought this game was going to kick it. And they're like, no, it's not going to be. We're only making 200 arcade cabinets and you're not getting one. So that being said, I think that we didn't really have any restrictions on anything because nobody's watching us.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or just didn't care like what we were doing. When it first, I recall when it first tested Johnny Cage versus Johnny Cage, and people were just like, "Oh my god, oh my god, oh!" They were just like, "Oh my god, this is going to be an awesome game." Then we started getting the hype. Like people were starting to stop by and watch us work. Like they'd come in, watch me. Knew I was in the building, so they'd run by and watch me like work with the other actors or work, or do stuff myself. Because it was just not. It was really fun because it wasn't just really work because we were all friends. We would be teasing each other, and through that teasing, we would get different movement, different special moves, fatalities. They're kind of, they're all from the stories that while we were creating it.
That's cool.
In addition to Johnny Cage, we've already mentioned that you were pretty much all the ninja, not just Sub-Zero, but also, all the palette swaps, Scorpion, and actually even Reptile, who was the first ever created secret character in a video game, which is quite the sort of feat to have, I suppose. Did you know ahead of time, because you did mention the Lin Kuei, did you know ahead of time that you'd be doing sort of palette swaps of these different characters, or what was the idea there?
No, we thought we were going to be able to shoot more characters, but because we were creating the game as we were filming, it took much longer.
Mm-hmm.
So originally when we were filming, the third character, before it really blew up, the fourth character, people from outside of like our acting group, our friendship group, started giving ideas. But during the Raiden character, Rich and Carlos wanted to have a secret tag team character.
Oh.
But only them two, not for anyone else. So if we're fighting Kano, you can hit the buttons, and all of a sudden you're fighting Kano and Raiden.
Oh, cool.
Hey.
So they wanted a secret tag team character. So I think at that point, looking back, is when the idea like started being like, oh, secret character. Because I was like, oh no, that's not fair. And they were goofing around doing movements to make this up, and everybody was laughing. But things like that were like, oh, now we have an idea of like having a secret, instead of a secret tag team, we can have a secret character. And what happened was when we were going to film, he didn't have a name, the Lin Kuei, we just called everybody Sub-Zero and Scorpion, the Lin Kuei. Okay. It was only going to be one, the yellow one. And then John was like, we're running out of time. It took so long to just create the game, get a basis to create the game. And now that we have like the outline of it and making it run smoother, we can just palette swap. And my brother and I teased John about the whole thing was sometimes I'd go in and I'd see John dressed in the same clothes that I saw him last night, the day before. I look at him and be like, you're all right. And he's like, at first he didn't say anything, but I'm like, you're all right? Because you look tired. He's like, you know what? I'm the only artist on this game, but there's 5 programmers on this game. So they think it's funny when the 5 programmers drop all their work on me and I have to have everything done and ready to go to the next step by the next morning. So I have to stay overnight. So me, I was like, hey, I didn't really, up to this point, Ed would come in for a little bit to kind of advise us on moves and things like that, but he really wasn't there like the whole filming and creating thing. So I was just like, you want me to go talk to Ed, after work? And he's like, nah. And he's like, nah. but Carlos was there, and he's just like, nah, John's just being lazy. He just doesn't want to go home and take a shower. He just wants to stay here and do that. And that's when he looked at me. He's like, with this palette swap, I think these ninjas are going to be brothers, and they're going to hate each other because one brother is going to kill the father to seize the clan, ruling the clan. So all of a sudden it became like that, just that moment of that whole teasing and stuff. And all of a sudden the story had changed into, we weren't sure what the story was, but now they were deadly enemies,
Right.
So, yeah. So this goofing around stuff, like Liz, like when I was like, oh, John was like, for Liz, who's Sonia, original Sonia. He was just like, you need to think of a finishing move, because we didn't have fatalities then. We had finishing moves. You got to finish him. It was what we came up with. But he's like, you got to think of a finishing move for Liz. And I was like, oh, we got to do the kiss of death. And John is like, dude, she can't go up to somebody and kiss them. And I started laughing because I'm like, oh, other people can rip your heart out, or you can punch your head off or electrify something, but you don't want there's no sex in this video game. So I was just like, no, not that kiss. I was like, just like, she should kiss her hand and blow it. And it's going to look like a butterfly. And then when it hits you, you blow up. And John was like, oh my God, that's a cool idea. But Liz turned to John and was like, why do I have to kill anybody? I don't want to kill anybody. Why can't I just be their friend? Why can't I just give them a flower instead of killing them? And so we all laughed and kept that joke going for a while. But later on in MK2, we have friendships, and we also have somebody who gives somebody else a flower. So that is fun. Yeah. So those type of things would be going on like all the time.
It's funny you mentioned in the conversation of secret characters, you also mentioned tag team. Now, initially, we did have the sort of, I guess you could call them the initial sort of phase of tag team, which was really the endurance sort of matches. But tag team sort of was brought into Mortal Kombat through Noob Saibot and Smoke, who you technically did portray as well. What was the idea behind bringing them into the game?
Well, during number 1, John was just like, hey, if we wind up with more time, we can do more palette swap, Lin Kuei. Can you create, instead of doing 2 characters, create 4? Do movements so we can have 4 people who look kind of the same, because they're all, all from the same family. Again, the story didn't grow to where one is mocking the other one or anything like that. This is the original creation. So he's like, create 4 more, and if we get time, we'll have them. We'll be able to do them. So during number 2, that was also that thing when I'm filming the Lin Kuei, and he was just like, hey, if we have more time, because again, we wanted even more characters in number 2, and we added some, but we did like John wanted 2 different female characters for number 2. Not the palette swapping because that we did. Besides the palette swapping, he wanted try to get somebody else in there to have other characters. So, but that was our basic, to add characters. This was the easiest way. If I would just create, and they would look at it and add names to them, and then be like, okay, then we're going to add backstories to whatever. So it became like the pattern to be like, okay, well, you can create, you're a martial artist. You can create, and what we're doing, or, you kind of, basically I'll create it. That's why I always say I'm co-creator, but a lot of people are like, oh, you're not co-creator. Two, during that time, there was no character design or anything like that. There was no titles like that. It was just whoever created it. So I kind of old school and be like, oh yeah, I co-created, because a lot of like ideas were just concepts, or even things that I came up with. I see them active in what they're doing today, in the motion capture today. I'm like, oh, I made that up. We got over the hump. I remember me goofing, and too, it's the stories that really kind of get me going, because I'm like, I remember the goofing around to get to different places, different stories. So the go-to was to have, Pesina make up more Lin Kuei, and we could palette swap.
It's cool to me that you talked about Raiden and Kano, the idea of them being the original tag team, because the Malibu Comics ended up making like a Raiden and Kano comic book with just the two of them. And I was always thought that was the weirdest storyline for a comic book to dive into. It's like, why would you want to team these two up for a comic? But like hearing that kind of idea was there from the beginning, even with you guys, consider something like that. That's just cool to me.
Yeah, like little things that happen, were you know going on. Like one time when Rich was filming, he started to dance, and then when Carlos saw that dressed as Raiden, he started to dance. So all of a sudden we have Rich dancing, and then Carlos dancing, and then when I got to film something, I did a little dance, and then when Hosang got to do his filming, he heard about that and saw that, and so he did a little dance. In the end, in Mortal Kombat 2, you see Hosang doing a little dance, but
Yeah.
that's how it kind of started, like goofing around as characters. Like, what if Kano could break dance, and what if Raiden can pop lock, and things like, just goofiness. Like all of a sudden, just those little jokes come out later on. It's pretty funny.
So when you guys were filming Mortal Kombat 1 especially, but even in Mortal Kombat 2, I mean, you didn't have the highest budget in the world. What did you think about the various costumes that were getting put into place for all the characters?
Well, for the first game, most of the costumes were our own
Hmm.
because we didn't have a budget. And John was just like, hey, first thing when I was filming Johnny Cage, I just wore the black spandex because that's the 90s, late 80s, 90s, and that's what you wear. And then he was like, next time you come in, bring a sash because the color, you don't have the color to separate the waist. So I just was like, okay, well, if I wear a black sash, you won't be able to see that. I have to wear something, that defines the waist. So I bought in a red sash. So now Johnny Cage has that look. Same thing with Liz. She's an aerobic instructor. She's got an aerobic outfit. Rich went to a surplus store with John to buy most of the Kano outfit. I went with John to the martial arts store to buy. We picked out a Taekwondo uniform on top because it just had a different look than Kano's cross Japanese traditional uniform to give the character a complete different look. And Carlos added from his own from breakdancing. He used to use these band-aids around his legs so that way he wouldn't trip over his pants when he's breakdancing, doing crazy legs. So now he put those on the bottom of Raiden's uniform. So when you look at MK1, you see how his legging is tapered on the bottom.
Yeah.
And those are bandages used when Carlos used to breakdance that he added to his costume. So during number 1, there was a lot of, we would just be able to kind of improvise on the costume. But number 2, they spent some money on it. They spent some money on we got it. We got a digital camera. I think that's the reason why there's really no behind the scenes footage from number 2 is because the first one was high 8, and 2, before it was done, John gave me those tapes. He's like, hey, he's like, not only am I going to put you on the side of the game as a thank you, for helping me create my dream. Here's all the tapes. Make a copy of them. He goes, you could tell people this is what you created and try to get new jobs for it. Just during the when they started selling the rights, all that stuff kind of disappeared. Where like, oh yeah, you don't have the right to do that stuff anymore because now it's about money.
Right.
Yeah. Well, what were some of the challenges you faced when playing your roles? Did you suffer any injuries throughout filming or anything like that?
A lot of 2 different examples like that I really think define everything is when Johnny Cage was supposed to it took us 5 hours to decide on sweeps because he wanted a leg sweep. So I started doing a leg sweep and I'm looking at it, I'm like doing a judo leg sweep. And I'm like, dude, that is boring. And so I started goofing around with that. And eventually I have the lower drop your body and leg sweep all the way around thing. I was like, now that is really cool because we can too, when we're filming it, head is low enough where it won't affect the hitboxes or things like that. So, you start to think with the project. But when we were the reaction, sometimes you get hit with it, and which was a totally different other falling down for like 3 hours is a different story, trying to create how they fall. But I would jump up over the legs where it's a miss. And then John is like, you're jumping too high, because when you jump high, your head shades on the top. And so now we don't have a proper image. It's, this part is darker. You got to jump a little lower. And so I was like, okay, so I'm jumping lower. And he's like, yeah, but jump lower and pick your legs up. And I look at him and I'm like, so I tried it a few times, and he's like, this is good, but hold up your legs longer. And then I look at him and I was like, I can float, dude. Float. He starts laughing, and we're laughing because we're tired at that point too. It's like, you get tired of doing this. Him and I being stuck in this room for like 8-10 hours, nobody coming in at this point or anything like that. Red Ed would rarely come in unless we needed his help with something in particular. But I looked across and I saw a staircase, and I was like, can I use that staircase? And John was just like, hey, it would be easier to use a chair. And I was like, yeah, but John, if I sit in the chair, it will look like I'm sitting in a chair, because you kind of sit and you can tell that somebody's sitting. But with the staircase, we can use that at different angles to kind of balance yourself and make it look like you're jumping. Because if you're balancing on the edge of the staircase, you can prop your legs over this way. So I explained to him how we can use the staircase to basically cheat the jump. And that way my head would be the thing. So he's like, let's try it. We tried the staircase. And this is one of the things, even today in Mortal Kombat, in the background, I see a staircase, and I just start laughing. I was like, oh my God, because I came up with that. I was like, that's one of the hurdles that we came up with to try to get over that. That was one of the filming hurdles. So the day before we're going to film the Lin Kuei, Tony Marquez is going to be it. Kung Lao is going to be that guy. But he drops a 25-pound weight on his toe and breaks his toe.
Oh.
Now, because all the kicks have to be slow to get clean images, he can't keep his balance on his foot because it's broken. It was broken. So John is like, you got to step in and do it. But the whole joke was, before Tony came in, John and I are in the store looking at uniforms for this, to create this Lin Kuei uniform, because it's different than the Japanese ninjutsu uniform. Because I really wanted it to be different, not the mainstream, because back then everything is Japanese ninjas. So I was just like, we were looking at the things, and then John looks at this and he's like, hey, what's the difference between an adult small and a child extra large? And I look at it. I didn't open the package. I look at it. I was like, the price. We should just get the cheaper one. And don't worry, Tony has to just fit into it, and he can't complain. Tony won't complain. So as a joke, we bought that, but then I wound up wearing that.
Oh my God.
So I threw a kick. I'm 20 pounds at that time. I was like 20 pounds heavier than Tony, different weight class, everything. So I throw a kick, and I rip the crotch. So it has to be black, because there's no Photoshop back then. And if you see white, that means John's going to spend 3 or 4 hours trying to shade in the skin color to make it black, as well as cut out each frame. So, without Photoshop, there's lots of time to be, worked on stuff. So I was like, we'll pin it. Got any safety pins? No safety pins. We only have the pins that you put into chalkboards. So I threaded those in here. So sometimes when I was kicking, I would be getting pricked by the pin in the thighs and things like that. So that was an uncomfortable hurdle.
I'm uncomfortable thinking about it.
Originally, we're trying to figure out all the falls and jumps. There's no mat. So I'm doing flips onto my back, onto my front. filming different ways to fall on concrete. And at the end of the day, I'm like all beat up, and I'm like, John, the rest of the crew is not going to want to fall on concrete. People are not going to want to do this. No, no matter how much glory is in this thing, they're not going to want to do it. We got to get mats to kind of protect people. And he's like, yeah. He was like, we have mats. I just need to dig them out, find out where they are, and dig them out and stuff like that, and make sure everybody has a mat. So the first different falls. Right now we cut it down to basically like 3 or 4 falls, and the rolling and things like that. We did all that experimentation, 4 or 5 hours of falling on concrete.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
You mentioned ripping your crotch. Now, was that the inspiration for the nut punch with Johnny, or where did that come from?
No, that was the actual when John eventually we were like, oh, we got to make fun of Van Damme, and I was like, nah, I pay for Van Damme movies, so I am a fan of Van Damme, but I will not do Van Damme because I know like Van Damme is not like a proper martial artist. He's a dancer.
A dancer, yeah.
I think he's got a blue belt or a green belt and some karate style or taekwondo style, which is basically 8 months training, which is basically nothing. In traditional martial arts, 8 years is where you have all your basics. Now you can learn the good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And that's true in anything. If you're a guitar player, there's no way you could play for 8 months and go join a rock band. No, you don't know enough. You don't have that skill. Or a professional golfer. No, you don't golf for 8 months and think like, oh, now I could go professional golfing. No, it's a skill. It takes time. 8 years is probably all around time for anything that has that skill or learning,
Mm-hmm.
Or so with this stuff, it was just kind of, getting pricked. You got to make the adjustments. You got to, we have to get this project really done. So, we're a lot of times, we glued Kano's mask on his face because he sweats a lot. And we tried spirit glue gum on his face and it would just fall off. So eventually we took model glue and we implemented it on his face. And when we tore it off, it tore off skin.
Oh my God.
But Rich, like, no, we have to get this project done. And this is things that are going to happen because too, it wasn't for money. We weren't getting paid a lot, but that was the agreement. We could create this game with them. That's what we agreed on. Any ideas we had that we would make them work. And when you give that to somebody, all of a sudden they're doing things like above and beyond things, gluing things on your face, getting pricked by pins, just, putting a sweaty, for Baraka, that thing had no air vents in it. When he put it over his head, it's like having plastic on your head.
Oh God.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was just a lot of sacrifice, but it was fun. There were jokes all through the whole thing.
I love how you guys basically embody your characters. I could see Rich getting his mask ripped off and just kind of grunting and snarling at everybody.
Yeah, he would walk around with that, like when he had anything Kano on, he was Kano. He'd walk around like Kano. That's that whole thing with, what you hear of like, get over here. When in the morning we had a meeting, John was just like, hey, Ed wants to come up with a move. And I was like, what do you want? And at this point I was like, well, what's his move? Well, can we make it work? And he's like, hey, I want a lasso. I want to tie you up. And then when you're tied up, you get a free hit. And then I was like, well, that's kind of Wonder Woman-ish. There's a rope dart, and I explained it to them and stuff like that. And kind of they're looking at me because I was like too lazy to go to my bag to actually get a rope dart out because I had one and show them what it was. Then later on in the day, it kind of hit Ed where he's just like, oh, there's a way you can do this stuff. And then we're just like, well, yeah, that's what we're talking about. How it escalates, but sometimes, you need that process to absorb what is going. But when I was doing the rope dart, and pulling him, because it's a weapon that's actually like a spearhead more than a knife, because a knife is designed to go in and out, while a spearhead is designed to go in and as it comes out, pull you or rip you, just by the diamond shape. So this was used to pull horsemen off their horses. But as I was doing that, Rich yelled out in the Kano voice, "Get over here!" And man, we just laughed so much. Ed walked around the whole day saying, "Get over here, get over here," like Kano, because it was just hilarious. But things like that, goofing around, then they wind up in the game.
Wow, that's quite. I mean, just to know about how the actual "get over here" came up in that sense. So, speaking of Scorpion, then I have to ask. You've mentioned that Johnny Cage is your favorite, but of the ninja that you portrayed, who was your favorite?
I like the story behind Sub-Zero more when we were creating than Scorpion. Scorpion, and I think that's kind of just how it rolled, having a color swap, because otherwise that story would kind of be boring for him to be, even though it's cool to be Lin Kuei, it would wear out well the first game, but we didn't know there was going to be a second game. But as far as story, that ended there. But later on, how it developed, I like that. Sub-Zero was actually, in the early days, was the good Lin Kuei. Scorpion was the bad guy. So, I like Sub-Zero more just because of that story.
So in 95, Mortal Kombat 3 came out. And at this point, they decided to kill off Johnny Cage, which, I mean, that's your iconic role. I mean, you're on the side of the cabinet and everything. Do you want to kind of talk about the events that led up to this?
Yeah. And, and again, it's the typical entertainment business story.
Mhm.
Happened to the creator of Batman, happened to the creator of Superman, happened to Stan Lee for a while, it happened to everybody. So, when they pre-ordered, when Mortal Kombat was a success testing, and they pre-ordered 10,000 games, I asked John and Ed, "Hey, you guys told me there's only going to be 200 games, and now you're pre-ordering 10,000. And I told you if you would have gave me a game, you would have created all you wanted, but you didn't. We helped create this thing. We need a bonus. And so John and I were just like, oh, don't worry, we're going to give all you guys a bonus. Everybody's going to get a bonus because everybody is going to. This is successful. These guys are not jerks. Use the word asshole, but they're not jerks. You're going to get a bonus. So then it went to the home system. I'm like, hey, you told me it's going to be arcade game. Now it's going to the home. They're like, don't worry, we're going to give you a bonus for that too. So I filmed for 3 months before I got paid. I filmed for 2 months without signing a contract for the rights to make the game, just because we didn't do it. We were friends and kind of just. Eventually, John was like, "Hey, you didn't, sign the disclaimer." And I was like, "I didn't know there was a disclaimer." He goes, "That's why you haven't got paid. You didn't sign for this, so they don't even know. They don't even know who to pay. So you got to sign this and get paid." So Rich, who was the second character, got paid before I got paid. So I waited like 3 months to get my first check from the creation of Mortal Kombat, from when I actually started working for them, not when I was pitching the game, because then I wasn't, under contract for anything. We're just pitching this game. But so eventually, during number 2, I was like, guys, you guys got a bonus already. I know you got a bonus already because you guys are, I was thinking to myself, you guys are driving new cars, you got new stuff. We didn't get our bonus yet. And I was like, hey, John, we didn't get our bonus. And then he's like, talk to Ed. And I went to Ed. Ed, we didn't get our bonus. And he's like, let me ask management. So the manager comes up to me, the owner, one of the owners, not the owner, but one of the head guys comes up to me. He's like, do you have any of what John and Ed promised you in writing? And I was like, oh, these guys have already talked about this. Because you didn't, you don't say that directly, just walk up to somebody and say that without knowing what's in the loop.
Mm.
And I was like, no, they gave me their word. And he's just like, then we can't help you. And then I stopped. So for me, when they, Mortal Kombat 3 didn't have Johnny Cage, didn't have Sub-Zero, didn't have Scorpion, their most popular characters, I think they just tried to, it wasn't until what was there was 3 threes, right? Or 2 threes. There was a three,
Three
there was
threes.
a trilogy or an ultimate, and then there was
Three
some.
ultimate trilogy. Yeah.
Yeah, so there were
Yeah.
there were 3 threes, but the first 3 didn't have any of the any of the real iconic characters. There was no Liu Kang for the number the third one until later, right?
Um, Liu Kang, I don't remember. I think he might have been in 3, but I think he might have been a different actor.
Yeah, he was a different
Mhm.
actor, but I think they brought him in later too. Because
Maybe.
everybody who sided with me at that point left the game, and we're like, hey, that's not right. They promised us that we would be, we helped create it. You know,
Mhm.
Carlos and Rich stayed on to work because they were into the computer graphics, into that. They wanted to be in that industry, so they stayed behind it and kind of
Mhm.
joined with helping that industry out. But too, I just kind of was like, okay, I'm done, and I left, and tried to get a lawsuit going. Hosung also did a lawsuit from California and won, while I did a lawsuit from Illinois and lost.
Oh, wow. I
So
didn't realize there were 2 different
Yeah,
ones.
I
yeah,
honestly thought it was like a class action, all of you together. But
no, the people who the myself, Catalin, Liz, and Philip did ours in Illinois, and we lost. While Hosung got somebody from California to do it, and he won. They settled with him for a lot of money.
So the
Because
one with yourself and the rest of the staff, that was all the same lawsuit? Because there's a couple different sources that say there were 2 different
there,
those 2 were 2 different ones.
yeah, well, there was me and Liz on one
Mhm.
side, and then there was Philip and Catalin had their own, but we were all from Chicago.
Gotcha.
We filed
Yeah.
from Chicago and lost. Hosung filed from California and won, which is kind of really weird if you're looking at the
yeah,
entertainment, how one person, you know, can do that. Later on, there are a bunch of stories, eventually that came out just because a lot of things come out in time about, how politics maybe in Chicago play off, different than California where it's not really, where you
Yeah.
don't face. So with that's and I walked away from Mortal Kombat for a really long time.
So somewhere in between all this, you ended up being involved in the very famous ad for the, video game Bloodstorm, where you wore your full Johnny Cage outfit and were playing, the Bloodstorm video game and basically endorsing it as better than Mortal Kombat. What where does that fall in line with all of this?
Well, before the falling out, during one of the things, just looking back at it, uh, so originally one of the guys who helped with Mortal Kombat 2, Alan Noon, got a new job at, I think it's Strata, who came out with Bloodstorm.
I think so,
So
yeah.
yeah, so he contacted Tobias and was like, "Hey, you think that we can have Pesina, do like an ad?" And then John called me up and said, "Hey, they want to do an ad with you as Johnny Cage, but you can't really be Johnny Cage, but you are Johnny Cage. So make some money, but we got to be careful." So I went to Ed, and Ed advised me on what I can wear and what I couldn't wear to do this ad. So basically, I can wear stuff that I owned because it's mine. It's not really theirs to, they can't own what I rightfully own.
Yeah.
You can't be like, oh, I own that. Well, did you buy that for me? No, it's been, so I did that. And so through that, the head was, man, I forget Leaf's name. He was pretty good because he paid a lot. Ed was like, man, charge them a lot because in the end they'll negotiate with you. If it's too much, they'll negotiate. And lessons from Ed Boon. He was just like, and if they say yes right away, you know that you undercut yourself. Next time you add more. And I was like, oh, okay. So I gave them the price, and they scarfed it up right away. So I know I got. But for me, it was a big for an hour's work. It was a lot of money for me at that time. It was a lot of money. It was more than the hourly that Acclaim paid us, which again I kind of threw out a really high number thinking that they would do that before, but they took it right away too. But but it was just life lessons. So we have our our contacts through that. I know somebody recently reached out to Alan to tried to get him to do an interview on that subject, and he said he would not do it, that he won't do anything that interviews involving Bloodstorm and MK. So he's like, if you want to do it on something else, he goes, I can talk about it. He goes, but I can't talk about that, period.
So what's the relationship like now between you and NetherRealm Studios, or any specific individuals, like obviously Ed Boon or John Tobias? Has there been any contact? Is there any communication between you?
There was for a while. There was for a while, and then and again, this is my opinion and how I see things. So eventually, I would talk to John every once in a while. When there was a Combat Con or an event, we would get together, have dinner, or eat together, hang out together, have a couple drinks together. But eventually, a third party started tweeting for him on Twitter.
Okay.
And so I sent a message out to John. So did a few of us, saying, "Hey, this guy is saying all this stuff. We know it's not you." And basically we were told that the person doing it is overzealous and wants to be protective, of John Tobias, the creator. There's a lot of John Tobiases out there. So the actual creator wants to be protective of him, and so he's kind of overzealous. And Rich is like, he's disrespectful, and things like that. So, and I was like, well, you know what, you can't. And I told Rich, the only way to rightfully debate this stuff, about all this stuff that we're just chatting about, is face to face. Will only be the only way that you can solve it. Doing it through a tweet, you don't really know who you're talking to. You have people who want to add stuff like that. Politicians do that all the time. Oh, my staff tweeted that, so I'm going to fire them, but I'm going to stay in office. Because that is the buffer for that. You're on Twitter and you're popular. That's the best buffer to be like, oh, somebody else did it. That way, if it ever bites you in the butt, no, I didn't do that. My writing agent did it, or somebody else can take the blunt. So, for when that started happening, and I saw that there quite couldn't be like one like that, I was just stopped, calling or hanging out or wanting to hang out with Tobias. And as far as Ed, I kind of even am today a little bit bitter, because Ed was the boss, and I felt like Ed never protected us. Ed knows that I helped John pitch the game to him. And I know he's the creator, but he's not the conceptual creator. He's more of like the lead programmer and franchise creator. You know what I mean? It's different than that concept. So with Ed, I don't really talk to, because I still kind of like mad. Like, guess what? And I understand that John and Ed can't come out and verify anything I say. Because then they'd be like, oh, you guys knew all this, and then you let Midway sell the rights to Warner Brother. You're never working in this industry again. And two, you owe us, $500 million. If they ever came out and said, that. So I don't really talk to them, but the other cast members, from 1 and 2, we hang out like as much as we can, or call each other. Rich almost calls me every other day. Tony calls me 5 times a week. I still talk to my brother because he's my brother. My mom would kick our ass if we didn't talk. But too, on that note, we are coming out with a documentary from all the people from 1 and 2 who will just tell their stories and tell, kind of what happened with that era, and so you will hear all these stories too from other people. So it's not like I'm the only one that's telling these stories. These other people will be coming out and saying, like, yeah, this happened, this, adding their own stories, but also kind of verifying what I'm saying, but more of a friendly manner, because the documentary is about our friendship. More about our friendship. Most of us started before MK, and even our time with MK was awesome. We still continue. We still hang out with each other. We still tease each other. We still, goof around with each other. So
it's a shame, honestly. I mean, to see that sort of bad blood, but at the same time, it's nice to see that appreciation for that time together too.
Yeah, and again, I understand. It's like more than, it's not that I like it, but I understand how it is and where it has gone. You can't really, you can't ruin your life over trying to, make something right. Usually, this type of thing, you make it right on your deathbed. Before you die, you're like, oh yeah, I'm the one who hijacked the plane, and then you got that, and then you die. So this too is kind of like that. I don't expect like John and Ed to be like, oh yeah, what he said is 100% true. But in my defense, with this documentary coming out, you're going to hear everybody else saying the same thing. So it's going to be more, it's going to be more like a little, not only believable, but you can hear different versions of the story in different ways, or adding and subtracting or goofing around, because when we were making, we were always goofing around.
When is this documentary supposed to come out?
We shot at C2E2, we shot a teaser trailer.
Oh, cool.
So they're putting that together right now. Just this
Awesome.
last day. The team came out, the 3 documentary team, and we had 2 extra cameramen come out, and just the mic was on us all the time. So you're going to hear us bantering, goofing around. Like, a lot of us are like old married couples. A long time, so we'll like argue and bicker at each other because we've kind of like, oh, he always does that. Oh, don't do that. Oh, come on, do that, or just or be like, hey, what friends do together.
Is there a name for the documentary?
I don't think they have a name yet. They're better at the names than I am. I just reached out to everyone from 1 and 2. And so far everybody from 1 and 2 has agreed to do it. So,
awesome.
The only one I didn't really reach out to was Brian Glenn. He was in 2, but they filmed him after I left.
Okay.
So, and 2, he was hired through outside of the through an outside source. But we'll have everybody else. The original Liu Kang, original Kano, original Sonya.
The original cast. Full stop.
Yeah, the original cast.
Yeah.
Because it's really popular right now to be like, oh, I'm the original actor from this series.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool if you realize that actor is the key thing. You're the original number 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 12.
Right.
Yeah, it's cool that they do that, but sometimes it's kind of like when you look at them, you're kind of like craziness. You're like, what's that? You're the original 5th.
It's cool that you and the rest of the cast, I mean, from both games, end up doing so much together. Like, you guys make appearances together. You've even been in movies like Book of Swords. There was a whole bunch of you together that kind of participated in that. Ho Sung Park, Catelyn, Richard DeVizio. And then you guys also did another video game that never got released, one for the Atari, the Realm Fighters. We talked a little bit about that game with Catelyn on a previous episode. Can you tell us anything about it? Because, I mean, it's something that I think a lot of people would have wanted to have seen because there were so many of you guys involved in that.
Yeah, actually, I joined because it was for Hosung. Hosung wanted to get into making video games. He realized,
cool.
Yeah, he realized, like, after doing MK and watching everything, he's like, man, those guys made a lot of money, and it's something cool to work on, and being from on the ground floor creating it, he got a good eye for how to create it. Seeing our interaction, not only with doing the basic movements, but our interaction was with the programmer, direct interaction with the programming and the artist and things like that. So it wasn't just like, oh, you do your job and that's it. You're like, hey, you're learning about, not that you're mastering everything, but you get a good idea of what goes on in making of a game. And so Hosung tried his hand at that, and that was a Hosung project. He was like, hey, would you help me do this game? He goes, but I'll make sure you get a contract, and you'll get paid. And I was like, and it's Hosung. So I was like, yeah, I'll do it, because I knew, it's, if your friend is not directly in charge, it's hard for them to protect you. As far as like John, I know he wasn't directly in charge, and there's not that much he can do being 22, and how you're going to defend your friends when you work for a company, when they probably are saying, hey, you shouldn't have done this, but not acknowledging, yeah, but you told me there was only going to be 200 games. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So him letting us have free reins to create the game, is probably difficult for him. But with Hosang, he was like, "Don't worry." He goes, we are a team, because we were, back then. Even now, I talk to him not as often as like the other guys, but at least every other month I'm in contact with him. He's in. So there's that friendship is still there. All the way around with everyone. So him being the lead for that game, we filmed some, not everything, but we filmed, I think, enough for somebody to play like the first couple levels. I think I'm saying that because someone sent me a link where you can play the first couple levels as like a sample or something like that.
Oh wow! Is it like something that's floating around on the internet, or was it just somebody that was involved?
Yeah,
Oh,
I would say it's on the internet because the guy sent me the link. He's like, "Hey, are you the Daniel Pesina from Theo Realm Fighter?"
oh wow!
Yeah, I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Do you know that this is out there?" And he sent me a link, and it's like the first 2 levels or something like that. I was like, did not know that this was even exist.
We're gonna have to find this, or you have to send it over to us.
Yeah, I'll try to look for that. It was when I used to be on Twitter a lot more. But man, social media, man, what this pandemic has taught me is there's a lot more respect for the little guys. You guys doing this podcast, during these times, like all the little guys really were the people who kept everybody sane. You're watching TV, sure, but you're jumping on the internet, watching podcasts, learning about stuff. You know what I mean? A lot of people who are trapped at home really, because at work you can't really watch a podcast without getting busted. But when you're working from home, you could have it playing in the corner and learning stuff and hearing different entertainment things. So it really has taught me like the value of like just doing this. The little guy doing all this stuff, creating all these content, to fill in that gap, that creative gap. So
yeah, the entertainment industry kind of flipped on its head during this time. So it's been interesting to see, like, even your appearances and stuff. I mean, it went from like giant conventions to even smaller conventions, I've noticed, because just the amount of people that are allowed into spaces and stuff.
Yeah, until you kind of recognize the skill. I tried it. I was on what is it? Twitch, right? The video platform. But I was teaching on, and then I realized, guess what? Got to have a good camera. I got the good camera. My lighting sucks. Oh, I got to invest in lighting. I invested in 4 sets of light. Oh, I need 4 more. 8 sets of light. Oh, they can't really hear me. My microphone sucks. Get a new microphone. Oh, that one sucks. Get another one. That one sucks. Oh, finally get like one that do the research. Get a Yeti and a microphone. And now I'm rocking and rolling. Oh crap! I can't read the lettering. I need to get a 50-inch TV. Things are scrolling on the thing. Oh my god! I need this. I need that. Dude, doing a freaking podcast is expensive and a lot of work.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, and you don't, sure you could realize it if somebody points it out, but when you don't if nobody points it out and then you try to jump in and realize like, oh crap, one hurdle, another hurdle, this, that, and it's a lot of work, man. I'm glad I'm happy I'm on this end again.
So, what was your opinion on the original games, looking back on them now? Like, do you ever play them once in a while, or have you tried any of the more recent games, or do you prefer to love the series in other ways?
I played a little bit, but they're fighter games, so they never fight like I think they would, and 2, maybe my ego. 2, when I'm like, I'd never lose. Like for me, I would be like, Shansung would never beat me.
Yeah.
Guess what? Let there be a tag team with Kano and Raiden because both of them could not beat me. That is me. That is my ego being like that. So I like first person shooters, but for me, again, the games, all the games, the movies. When I see the movies, I really enjoy them because I'm not super critical about the action or anything like that. When they're doing their stuff, it reminds me of the stories and just start laughing and remember my friends. You know what I mean?
That's
Sub-Zero
cool.
Ice Ball. I see Sub-Zero Ice Ball. Oh man, I start laughing. With the first movie, they have a couple frames where I was looking at, when I first saw it, I looked at the framing and I'm like, wait a minute, that looks familiar. So I thumbed through my pictures, because we gave two pictures to Kazanoff, the producer of it. And then I see a picture of Liu Kang and Sub-Zero in the same exact pose as we did during the game. And I'm like, oh my God, they just took they took exactly what we created and they did this and then I'm like, then I'm watching then that makes me watch the movie again to be like, oh, they got that from our picture. They got that from our picture. Oh, they got that from our picture. You know what I mean? So I just laugh because it's just not laugh at them, but it brings me joy to really see that the franchise is doing well and that two other actors are doing things that I'm like, oh my God, we created that. You know what I mean? They can never. That's too why the OG is kind of difficult, because OG usually means he had something to do with the creation or something like that. So unless you're creating like, Liz really wanted the leg throw.
Yeah.
So every time you see Sonya doing the leg throw, even in movies today or in games today, that's Liz. That is she wanted that in the game, and that is in the game.
That's so cool.
And two, the way we did it was like, I got kicked in the face a couple times because they wanted to catch her as her body is leaning back in a clear image. So I would crouch to the side, and when she's going over, I would try to rush up and grab the very tips of her shoes, because you can't grab the whole shoe, because then John is coloring in your flesh in the white. Now that's more thing. So I'm trying to grab it in a way where I'm as little obtrusive as I can be, holding her legs up. So the first time it came over, it friggin' hit me in the eyeball. Yeah. So I'm trying to like this, and it friggin' scrape my ear. So when I see the leg throw, it's totally different than how other people see it.
You see a boot to the face.
Yeah. I remember getting kicked in the face with that. Or I remember it rubbed my ear in such a way that it really freaking bothered me 2 or 3 days. You know what I mean? Where it was all raw in here. So, when you see stuff like that and associated stuff like that, it's cool that all the other people are doing it. That's awesome. But for me, I see everything like kind of in a different light. Remembering like, oh man, I remember, this guy made that up, or this person made this up, or how this is, this happened. So yeah, I like all.
You can see that what you were saying about sort of holding Sonya's leg grab for a second, even in the games. I remember, like, I visually remember just how it like kind of pauses there for a second and then she flips you back. So I see exactly what you're saying. Although I'm also curious now, because you've mentioned the ice ball. How did the ice ball come about for Sub-Zero?
The ice ball was John and Ed were bickering a little bit about having like the ice ball, like having an ice thing happening. And I was just like, when they were like, oh, you got to shoot ice. I was just like, man, shoot ice. That's like okay. How would you do that? Well, you'd have to take, moisture out of the air. So I would go like this. You have to shape it, and then you'd have to shoot it out. So when they were saying like, oh, throw ice, it wasn't just like stick your hat and throw ice. I had a process, like, how do you make that real? Because we're making like a real fake fighting game. It's real to some extent, but I'm not keen on the guy just sticks his hand out and and something comes out of his hand.
Yeah. In the original Mortal Kombat 1, it seemed like he was throwing it kind of from his chest, if I remember.
Yeah, he was doing that or something.
Yeah, because he brings it down like this.
Okay.
Yeah, it was like moisture down into his dantian in his lung, because the lung can hold the moisture, and then your energy comes from your middle thing, and then you shape it, so it's like this, and then you throw it out. So even when I see other people doing this or that, I kind of I'm like, oh yeah, that was really fun to create that. So when I see it in movies or in Mortal Kombat, other people doing it in the games, it's always kind of like, I'm kind of like, yeah, I remember that, how that happened. That's kind of cool to too. Kind of like remembering that process. Kind of, you have a sense of pride.
Yeah.
I mean, I was wondering as well, because the sort of decision as to go with ice. I thought it was more just like he was a polar opposite to Scorpion.
Man, and I don't think anybody ever thought of that, but could be. But when we were doing, well, too, like even with Scorpion, like, a Scorpion's going to blow flame on you and you're going to get lit up. And then I did it a couple times. I looked at John and said, I'm not doing this anymore. And John is like, don't be an asshole. Why are you not doing this anymore? I go, because if I do this, my cotton mask will be on fire and then I'll be running around with my head on fire. And then John is like, he's like, again, asshole, pull the mask down. So I do it a couple times. And then Rich looks at me and he goes, it would be cool. Rich is, even to this day, deathly afraid of skeletons. Skeletons are the creepiest thing. Could be the devil, could be Freddy Krueger. He doesn't have a problem with any of those. He has a problem with skeletons. So for him, he's like, it would be cool if he pulls his head off and he's a skeleton. And I'm like, oh, and he's like Ghost Rider and his head's on fire. And so that's how, just goofing around with that. That's how, like, that different things happen. So even when I see that, I start cracking up because I was like, who in the hell would be like that? Who in the hell would tell, I'm not doing this anymore because my head would be on fire? Who, just to give the guy shit, because I was giving John shit, over it. Well,
So recently, you've reprised your role as Johnny Cage in the movie Mortal Kombat: Legends Never Die, and you've also played Shang Tsung in the past for the fan-made film. What was it? Mortal Kombat: Fate's Beginning. Would you reprise any of your roles in any of the games if there was a chance to do it again, or has there ever been any contact with you to do that sort of thing?
Yeah, I wouldn't think there would be any contact because that would open the door to everything that happened.
Right.
That technically, a lot of their, being there, not only from my point of view, but, if you talk to Hosang or Liz or Philip or Catalin or Rich, you can't talk to my brother because he's, they have him sealed up. Warner Brothers has him sealed up for the work he's done for them. But, if you talk to those guys, they're going to say the same stories that I'm saying. And then it's going to be questionable whether they ever own the IP.
Yeah.
And that acknowledgement means like, oh, guess what? Negotiations started. It's a multi-billion-dollar franchise. Oh, negotiations start at $700 million to be featured in your game or movie.
Yeah.
That's a little difficult price to start out at.
It's about the money.
Yeah. So, so that is, I'm not saying that it's never, but that is a big, they would, for them to come forward knowing that might get out there, that they might have to recognize that is probably not a hurdle they would like to do with probably myself or any of the original cast. Maybe some of the actors from like 3, 4, 5, or the movies, they could probably do that because they own their rights solidly. But for everybody else, probably not so much, just because of that acknowledgement. You're going to open that up. And I don't know if they want that opened up. So you might probably see characters from 3, the actors who did 3 or 4, more likely than the actors who did 1 or 2.
Yeah, which we sort of have seen kind of in Mortal Kombat 11. Speaking of which, you did mention you're not into the games as much, which fair enough, but you did also say that you saw the latest movie. How about any of the shows, Mortal Kombat Conquest, Mortal Kombat Legacy? Have you kept up to date in any way?
I didn't watch any of those shows, I watched I kind of got heartbroken on the second original Mortal Kombat movie.
We all were.
It was a money grab. It was cool to see it was cool to see some of the people I knew in number 1. And 2, again, with the stories of the creation, I really enjoyed that. But number 2, I was just like, the Annihilation, I was just like, so when Conquest came out, I was just like, you know what? I'm not, those are just money grabs again. Because I could see what direction it's going in.
Yeah, right.
I'm going to spend my money. It's going to be on cheap martial art movies or horror movies. That's what I'm going to do. So I'm not going to go see that. But, the new movie, I thought that, I liked the actors. I liked I like some of the things, but I think that, for me, they should get a director who is a fan. It seems like Marvel, gets directors who are fans of the franchise as opposed to just think that they're going to create.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mortal Kombat's already created. So for you to think that, oh, I'm going to create it, no, it's already created. And that's what people like. You know what I mean? They might not like your take on what you think it should be because there is already something to scale it up to match it up with an expectation already. So, for me, I like the actors and like that. I didn't like that some of the main people died without the tournament happening.
Mhm.
I didn't like that. I didn't like that. It felt a little rushed just because when I'm looking at the stages, it looks like they only had 3 or 4 basic backgrounds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Come on, you get this billions of dollars. Make a different set.
Apparently not. The budget was apparently much smaller than we all expected it to be. That might have
Well,
been one big reason why.
well, don't do that.
Yeah,
Because
agreed.
$1 billion franchise. Just because you know that Mortal Kombat fans will see it no matter what, doesn't mean you should stick your hand in their pocket.
Agreed.
You got to give them something for it because that's why I go to conventions. People come out to see me because Mortal Kombat fans are different than a lot of other fans.
Mm-hmm.
They will come they'll come just hang out with me, and I like it.
Yeah.
I like going there and seeing just talking. We just talk about life. They talk about a little bit, not more Mortal Kombat directly, but what Mortal Kombat, how during their youth,
Yeah.
how it shaped them, or when they fan, or it brings their life story, and I like to hear that.
Yeah. Well, Master Pesina, do you have any other ongoing projects that you'd like to share with our viewers?
Just watch out for the documentary. We don't know a name, but we'll get the teaser out there when it's ready. Just look out for that, just to kind of get a different perspective of, you hear the company perspective, but just get a different perspective from the actual actors or the people who were invited in pre-project.
Nice.
Pre-project, just to get that. People can find me on social media, Facebook, Master Pesina, get my plugs in. Instagram, Master D Pesina, mostly there. I was on Twitter. I'll probably go back to it once I figure out, what I really want to say on Twitter. I think I'm going to make it more. Yeah, I think it's going to be more of like the focus about martial arts and like not only that, about how to make it unique for the industry. Because when I see Mortal Kombat, I see what I created 30 years ago. And when I see the new ones, I'm like, dude, they're still doing the same thing. Sure, it's faster and the graphics are better and the play is designed better, but the general movement, and I understand that people don't want to change stuff, but I think you could change some of the fighting part of it, some of the physical fighting part of it, to improve that a little bit. So, yeah, so going to do that.
Well, before we let you go, we want to ask, what is your favorite finisher? Fatality, brutality?
My favorite finisher is the kiss of death from Sonya. Sure, it's, when people see it, it's cool, but again, the genuine story behind it, just because out of that story is the friendship comes out of that, and just comes like to the story of like, oh, guess what? You can rip somebody's heart out or pull their spine out, but you can't kiss somebody on the cheek. That's great.
That's exactly right? What we've been saying for so long. It's like it's this culture of gore is okay, but anything somewhat sexual in nature is like, oh, we can't go there. It's like, really? Why is that the limit?
Yeah, so that when I see that, I do that. Not only because I created, but because of that, the whole story behind it, how it was, how it was like, yeah, it's kind of like, yeah, we're ripping people's heart out.
Well, Master Pesina, we'd like to thank you so much for joining us today on the Realm Kast. It's been a pleasure to have you on.
Yeah, it's good seeing you. Nice meeting you. Yanni, Timo, good to see you again as always.
Thank you. It was great to see you. And we'd like to thank all of our listeners for stopping by the Realm Kast today. You can find Yanni and myself, FANTiM, on the Mortal Kombat group on Facebook, as well as Yanni on the Mortal Kombat meme realm. Special thanks to Uppercut Editions for the continued support. You can follow them at Uppercut LLC on Twitter and the Mortal Kombat Encyclopedia Project on Facebook. You can catch up on all episodes of the Realm Kast on YouTube, Facebook, iTunes, and Spotify. Thank you.